Yikes, good morning everybody. I think I'm going to have Wahab write my resume up going forward here, so thank you for the introduction. Brahim Gideon, who was supposed to be here, our CTO at TELUS, unfortunately got pulled away on an urgent corporate issue, and so he gives his apologies to the conference attendees for that. Brahim asked me to pitch hit for him this week, and it was very nice of him to do it. I appreciate the opportunity. However, he said, Jim, you're going to give a talk on the pollution of hyperconnectivity and the challenges of consumer electronic devices. And I basically said, what? And it actually took a bit of a single malt beverage with high alcohol content for me to sit and think about this for a while to exactly interpret what exactly that title meant. And in thinking about it, I actually decomposed it into, is the current Internet of Things rollout optimal for what we're trying to do to help our customers? And does every device an individual owns need to be connected to the Internet? And further, will this connectivity paradigm actually create meaning, or does it actually become the source of the pollution in the title of the presentation? Again, upon further reflection, and I've been in Las Vegas this week to see the entire conference, I think that where I've concluded is that connectivity should make society's life better, easier, more convenient, and less expensive. And I think that, I don't know if anybody in the room saw the LG corporate keynote right at the beginning of the conference, but Dr. I.P. Park actually put it in very concise and precise terms. Does the technology that we're applying actually make your life better? And if it doesn't make your life better, should you actually be doing it? And I think that sort of gets to the root of the whole idea of where we're headed with respect to big data, completely connected device ecosystems, and the proliferation of data that we're going to have to be dealing with, especially in the 5G era. I think society as a whole has to really take a look at that from a technology adoption perspective and see where the puts and takes are in terms of where we're improving life for end users, consumers, people, and where we're not. And I think that in 2019, the answer to that is, I think we are, but I think it's kind of a partial yes with respect to IoT and connected environments, but I think that there's a lot more that we can do. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. Hotspots at the lowest level, even before that, telematics for vehicle servicing and maintenance. That comes on board in addition to that. And it's interesting because that domain today changes the persona or the user experience. You might have a particular ecosystem that you're using with your personal area network, with your phone, with your tablet and stuff. The minute you get into that car today, it becomes the master. That is the, if you will, the persona that you have to adapt to. On the show floor here, there are several companies looking at that and actually trying to invert that paradigm and actually making the user interfaces on the smart vehicles match the persona of the user. Sort of a very interesting twist. I don't know quite how it'll play out, but it is definitely a customer-centric view. Obviously, we're sort of at the tipping point of the era of connected vehicles beyond sort of the hotspot domain. DSRC, 5G, next generation V2V communications, obviously are going to be very important, both in the pre-autonomous vehicle domain and in the autonomous vehicle domain. One of the problems, however, is that for the foreseeable future, certainly in my lifetime, you're going to have a heterogeneous environment. Non-connected vehicles like I use, semi-connected vehicles, semi-autonomous vehicles, autonomous vehicles. Again, a problem of heterogeneity and lack of communication. Just like consumer ecosystems, vehicle ecosystems. certainly, as I've described, right, the hybridization of different capabilities and the ability to communicate with these vehicles with different capabilities is a critical thing from a safety perspective, and actually is one of the prime drivers for a lot of the activities in smart cities work going on today. Beyond the human with the multiple networks, beyond the multiple networks with the vehicle, of course, multiple networks in the home on top of all of this. Significantly, those multiple networks today very rarely interwork and remain another element of heterogeneity that disenfranchises the ability to actually take an aggregate view of a person, the context of the person, and the state of their environment in order to begin to get insights with respect to how to improve things with respect to IoT, and of course, with respect to being able to help them via AI. Given that plethora of environments, networks, services capabilities, all of them striving to become more intelligent, a major problem sets in of reality. Every one of those vertical systems is effectively attempting to be a problem solver for the consumer. The problem is they're being problem solving for the particular function that they're purpose built for. And unfortunately, because these systems aren't truly orthogonal, you have the issue that you have systems that could interfere with one another, systems that can prevent functionality from achieving what the design intent was, etc. And that's certainly the case, like even in the home automation domain. A combination of Zigbee or Z-Wave, or at least the original version of Z-Wave, as well as, say, Wi-Fi automation, did not interwork very well. There are products today that help that, but on top of all of that, as I said, security is a very important issue. On top of all of that, security and management of those devices has become a problem and continues to be a problem. Today, there is very little allowance for coordinated software upgrades, and that could be disastrous, I guess. So the device ecosystem and its functionality, the connectivity regime, and then, of course, as you head towards identity and authentication of the devices and the systems, you have yet another dimension that is heterogeneous and is something that is ripe for coordination across the domains. And for instance, Facebook is very often used as an identity integrator, even for some of the services that we sell, and certainly services that our customers use for sure. Again, I'm not quite certain that I really want Facebook to be the trusted agent for that, but a lot of our consumers use it. I think the reality of the situation is that in net, there are half a dozen potential methodologies for providing authentication, verification of context, and providing integrity. They're not going to disappear, but one of the things that we can work towards is getting some sort of brokering environment, some sort of abstraction environment, such that we can interwork. And I think that that is extremely critical. I think that from that perspective, and I'm just taking a look here, consumer electronics companies need to monetize the innovation, and that's where the heterogeneity comes from. And hence, that differentiation is what keeps us in business. If you go back to the old telephony world with circuit switch telephony, there was interworking between different families of circuit switches, but the actual key monetization capability was always from unique or heterogeneous features, never across platforms, at least in the early days. I think that as well, if you actually take a look at other sectors other than IoT, and certainly for us, broadband access and broadband access devices is one that we manage ecosystems that are heterogeneous. Things like TR69 and that kind of device management allows for us to have commonality of control across a heterogeneous environment with differentiation with vendor extensions still being allowed. And I think that that is potentially a way that can be looked at, I think, in terms of the IoT domain, in terms of smart devices. My last comment about this is that if you actually take a look at an average Canadian home, there's over 30 devices, active devices present in terms of IoT or smart devices today. And ironically, still the center of the household, the television, is very rarely integral to those various ecosystems. And I think that that is potentially a miss from the consumer electronics manufacturers. I know that LG and Samsung tried to enforce ecosystems to actually exploit that device capability over the last 10 years. They have not been able to integrate very well until recently with the ecosystems that have been of customer choice, being Apple, Google, and Microsoft. That is changing, for sure. So, as I've said, multiple disparate ecosystems exist, and they aren't going to disappear, but how are we going to get them to interwork? Today, in the connected vehicle domain, a General Motors vehicle doesn't communicate with a Tesla vehicle. BMW vehicles will be communicating with Audi and Mercedes-Benz vehicles, obviously because of regulatory stuff in their own home market territories. But largely across the ecosystems in the home, to the ecosystems on the personal area network, to the ecosystems in the cars, these remain diverse. And how do we get some sort of benefit, some sort of aggregate benefit for the consumer? Certainly, you ideally would want to have a situation where you have a central ability to do things to make life easier for you, for the end user, right? You'd want to automatically, when you drive out with your smart car, you would like to have the residence turn down its power consumption, secure itself, and be ready for no occupancy. You'd like to be able to resubscribe to maybe your vehicle registration subscription, maybe your newspaper subscription if you still had newspapers, and have that done automatically for you. And also, you'd like to be able to create and fulfill even things like grocery stuff, given the fact that contextually maybe you are heading towards a grocery store, and potentially there is an opportunity for you to make use of somebody actually picking all of the goods you need as you approach the area, the store in your vehicle. All of these things require some sort of information store across these disparate ecosystems, right? I think the most obvious approach to that is to try to take a look at a coordinated view of open APIs. Most of the ecosystems on the left today offer some form of open API, but as I suggested in my circuit switched example, the issue turns into one of what capability is exposed to be able to interwork with other systems versus what capability remains as part of a discrete capability for a customer. So, given that there are multiple identities, multiple authentications, proprietary interfaces, and security concerns, what is the pathway to rationalizing this? I think the time is to rally around a coordinated set of APIs, at least a minimum message set form of APIs across the ecosystems in order to facilitate a baseline level of interworking. I think we should actually reward the openness of interworking in terms of providing additional capability for the vendors that choose to do that approach. And I think all of this gets down to being able to make things frictionless, but actually we really, and as a carrier, we really want to be able to make that connectivity story much more friendly. Our company moniker is TELUS is future friendly, but actually make it seamless so the customer does not have to make overt decisions with respect to connectivity requirements depending on the context or location or time or device that they might be using, or application, right? I think that combined with an identity management solution that embraces or encompasses those in use by customers today, but if you will, is a superposition of those such that we can exchange information across ecosystems is critically important. For instance, my Apple phone can detect my face quite well. Unfortunately, my Google Chromebook can't, right? That sort of context information from an AI perspective is not shared today. And I think that the other point sort of gets back to a telco approach to delivering a solution and improving the quality of the technology for the users. And that is a unified and tested way to do device management across these ecosystems. It's absolutely critical, especially with cybersecurity threats as they are occurring and continue to occur and accelerate, to be able to, in an agile manner, be able to address devices and elements across ecosystems in order to quell threats, diminish attack vector points, etc. Today, with the ecosystems as they are, and with the operations people being generally end consumers, that is very difficult to impossible. We can't stop customers from inadvertently clicking on phishing attempts or getting false firmware upgrades. All of that depends on a higher level of security. And for us, as a carrier, obviously we're relying from our legacy in wireless communications on embedded SIM technology and physical SIM technology, but other forms of hardware root of trust actually play into that. And I think that getting to a device management capability such that you can take bad actors out, you can enforce coordinated firmware updates across fleets, across different device ecosystems is critically important. So, what can we do? As I started today, I don't think every device needs to emit data. And again, it was very interesting as Verizon talked about 5G capabilities. There was a very interesting statement about being able to handle 1,000 times more devices per unit area in coverage, and also being able to handle orders of magnitude more data from each one of these devices. And the hypothesis that was put forward was, this is great. If we can collect a terabyte of data per consumer device, just imagine what sort of inferences and AI conclusions we can get to. I think that actually gets back to the original statement. That is data pollution. And I think that as a result, we really have to consider that not every device needs to emit data. This leads to literally a new generation of garbage in, garbage out. I think standard processes and device models are going to help limit the amount of data attached to a customer. And I think that this is actually a very important thing from a privacy, security, and integrity perspective. We should only be storing data about a customer that is absolutely needed, and it should only be persistent for as long as it's needed. It should not be stored in repositories, like many of the cyber threats that have occurred here in North America and around the world with respect to data that had been cached or stored that was no longer needed. I think, given that as well, security from the ground up, and at TELUS, all of our systems and services go through a regime called Design for Security, is absolutely critical. That is foundational to this, and whether it's as simple tools as preventing trivial password generation or no password use in a lot of home automation devices that we actually see in our network today, all the way up to using key exchange, PKI infrastructures, hardware root of trust, to ensure the integrity of both the communications link as well as the application, as well as the user, and as well as the user context. That is important in a hyper-connected world. And I think, getting back to the statement from the CEO of LG, I think that as we design things, as we standardize environments, and as we build new capabilities for our customers, we have to continuously ask ourselves, is this actually making life better for the intended consumer or not? And if it's not making life better for the consumer, frictionless, more capability, ease of life, we shouldn't be doing it. So, in conclusion, we have to enforce secure by design. That is literally job one in this world. We do have to protect consumers from themselves, and that involves security for sure, but it also involves that whole idea of having a unified way to be able to manage a fleet of devices and capabilities for the consumer. And then lastly, I think from an industry perspective, we really have to work hard. And in the previous discussion in this room, they talked about the interworking of academia, industry, and government. I think providing a level playing field is absolutely healthy, and it is absolutely the most efficient way for us to be able to allow multiple entrants, multiple innovations, but in a domain where security and customer perspective is first and foremost.